share a story, share ideas, or ask a question of our panelists this evening can do so by pressing *3, and you'll be routed to an operator who will ask you to provide your name and the nature of your question or comment. Our next question coming to us online is from Dominique, and Dominique would like to know, what is the region doing to increase hiring of more visible minorities?
Hello, it's Chair John Henry again. That has been a unique topic of discussion for the last couple of months. I know that the police services are reviewing their practices now, and I'll get Chief Martin to comment on that. And for us at the region, we have started to look at all of our policies here at the region, and we haven't. Data has not been something that we have openly collected. The last report we did here at the region was in 2014, and that is being updated again so that we have an accurate relationship with our employees. Somewhere close to 5,000 people work for the region of Durham.
Want me to go? Well, just to follow on what the regional chair said, as far as the police service goes, it has been very much a topic of interest with our police service, as well as many police services across certainly the GTA and the province, and quite frankly across the country. From our perspective, over the past 5 years, we've increased the proportion of our underrepresented groups in our recruiting through a variety of initiatives. We've gone to diversity recruiting drives, female-only preparation sessions, and this has resulted in approximately 40 to 50% of our new recruits hires over the past 5 years being from underrepresented groups. Is it a destination? Far from it. It's a constant. It's a competition for recruits at the best of times in every police service, so we are always open to new suggestions and new ideas. With respect to recruiting, we've improved, but we haven't improved to the point where we would be satisfied with that, so we're continuing that journey. Thank you.
And Anne-Marie Morrison.
A quick question with regards to recruitment processes. I know, we were all prepared about coming to this meeting tonight, and so I just wanted to ask you, what was the ratio of black students that were hired last year or the year before to the region of Durham's office, and what are the plans for next year? I know we're in COVID, right? So what are the plans next year for the hiring process with regards to students to reflect, your new direction that you're going to?
So I think that one of the challenges with regional government is that we're an employer of where people tend to have long careers, and as we're moving along now, and you're seeing people retire, the demographics of our buildings are changing, and that's a good thing. When you look at our communities, when everyone was hired 25 years ago, they're now coming up to that retirement time, and now the representation of our community has changed so much. The representation within our buildings and our staffing is changing so much, and that's one of the challenges with government is that because people tend to stay for a career, it cycles in years. But now we're starting to see a very different mix of people coming in through the door of this building. And I'm happy to say that it's not just in policing, it's through our entire process. For hiring students, we do hire students in the summertime. I can't give you the exact answer. I know that our students have to leave early this year because they have to deal with the COVID issue before they go back to school. But we did have to, during this process, we had about 230 people that we had to hire just to deal with the challenges in our long-term care facilities with COVID. Because we lost the volunteers and the family members who came in to look after their families. So while I can't have that answer for you tonight, I will have that answer to the best of my ability within a few days.
Chair, I don't want to beat up on you tonight, and I'll take my shots at the chief later. But I think it's important, so I'm going to frame this in the context of advice. we have to ensure that the pieces within the region that we're looking at, whether it's the human resources pieces or the service delivery pieces, because we've had two questions now around, one around affirmative action, one around mental health. And we're bringing this, I want to bring it back to the issue of anti-Black racism. So it's important to make sure that the people that are having these conversations and making an assessment in terms of what we need have the appropriate lenses. So when the caller asked about, are we planning on having capacity, i.e. similar to the City of Toronto, where they have the Fighting Anti-Black Racism Office. So there's embedded capacity that any department within that municipality can draw on for assistance. I think that's where people wanted to go. So it's going to be important to make sure people are trained, or that you bring the expertise in terms of what you're looking at in order to get to where we need to get. Because I would submit that had we had that previous to that lens, and once again, this has nothing to do with intent, we might not be experiencing some of the challenges and barriers that we are currently experiencing, right? And we don't want to repeat that. So it's going to be important that you skill up the people that are looking at it and having those conversations, that you reach out to the community in terms of where that expertise lies and understanding of how that manifests itself in terms of whether it's access to opportunities, the economic pieces in terms of the Black businesses here in Durham, and even the opportunity for summer students. And that if we're not, the chief talked about data collection, if we're not collecting the data and analyzing, and I say this all the time, if we don't know what we have, how are we going to know what we need? And then at what point will we know that we have enough of it if we're not collecting and analyzing?
Thank you very much for those comments. We are still working to resolve some technical issues, but we have many opportunities to hear from community members, especially people who are listening to our online live stream right now through the Durham website. You can submit questions, comments, stories, ideas by typing them into the comment question on your screen. Anyone who would like to go live once we have our technical issues resolved can please press *3 on your phone keypad. You'll be routed to an operator who will ask you to provide your name and the nature of your question or comment, and we'll get you live on the line. I'm going to read another question that was submitted online. This is from Jackie, and Jackie's question is the following. In addition to the call for a minimum 10% divestment from the Durham Region Police Services, what other resources, financial included, has the region set aside to support local community organizations?
So it's John Henry, the chair of the region again. So we do have a grants program within the region that applications can be made for funding. But I'm also very proud of the fact that when we put our paramedic response unit out last year, we were taking services to the most vulnerable people in our communities. We've partnered a paramedic and a social worker who travel throughout the entire region of Durham to deliver services as needed. They actually use an unmarked vehicle, so they have been able to do great things. So we are working with every organization that touches our office. We do our best to help them, including raising money through the office of the regional chair and our former regional chairs, including Roger Anderson, to make sure that bursaries are available for students at college and university here in Durham region, that we raise money to make sure that it goes into programs and they're funded through the regional chair's Golf Classic, which will be carrying on again once COVID's gone. And I'm proud of the fact that we're able to raise money, and part of that money is divided and goes to Ontario Shores for the great work that they do as well. And I have made a commitment during my term in office to continue to raise as much money so that we can work with Ontario Tech, Durham College, and Ontario Shores.
Thank you very much for that, Chair Henry. Our next question was submitted online from Sarah, and Sarah asks the following. Will Durham Region be completing employee audits for marginalized and equity-seeking groups employed by public entities and services that they fund?
So I'm very lucky tonight. I am joined by our CAO, Elaine Baxter-Trahere, and I'll let her answer that question because she has been working on that, and she can give you the progress report.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. There are a number of initiatives going on within the region that Chair Henry and I have launched this year. This initiative tonight is intended for us to learn what is going on in the community of Durham and to understand what we need to do as a community development organization to assist that. Within the government, you've probably seen we are in the process of hiring a manager for diversity and inclusion within our Human Resources Department. We've already reviewed human resources with respect to eliminating barriers, and there'll be further work done on that as soon as that person's on board. We're also proposing in the next budget to be adding an individual through my office in our Strategic Initiatives Unit that will specifically look at community development to address issues of anti-Black and other racism within the community, and also to ensure that we strengthen our ability to do social development within the community of Durham, which is something that would be a new function for the municipality. The final thing we'll say, as you heard the chair mention, we have not done an employee survey in a number of years, and it is on our work plan to launch a survey for 2021. It will be part of the budget, and that will get into a variety of issues, including the makeup of our staff. We are in the process of recruiting another facilitator to begin an anti-racism and an anti-Black racism strategy within the government so that we do understand what our current employees are experiencing and what we need to do to address any issues.
We'll hear from Anne-Marie Morrison.
Thank you so much. The initiatives are to be commended. I'm happy to hear about that. I have two questions. You mentioned that you're looking at hiring a manager for the equity, diversity, and inclusion positions. What are you doing? What things are you putting in place to protect that position? The person that you hire for that position will now need to address certain uncomfortable situations, and I believe a lot of managerial positions they're not unionized, they're not secured, so that person coming into that position may be a little bit nervous about addressing those situations. So can you tell me what things are being put in place to give that person more job security? The second thing that you mentioned, okay, so you know what, go ahead with the first question.
Yes, and just a friendly reminder that we want to hear more about what is going on within the community of Durham. As I mentioned, we are in the process of recruiting a consultant that will assist us with addressing barriers and issues within the government that are being experienced by our staff, and certainly that consultant will still be on board when we retain the manager. That process is ongoing. There will be lots of support. We know that it's going to be a challenging job, but the person is being recruited knowing that it is a challenging job and knowing what our expectations are.
Okay, so thank you for that. I recognize that that will be a challenging job. The second question I had in mind was, what are you doing with regards to the inclusiveness? I know you're hiring a manager for EDI, but sometimes when we go into a workplace and we're seeing a manager or supervisor that person is representing, the minority. They're not persons who that we could relate to. I wonder if you understand what I'm saying. So I go into a workplace and you say, okay, this person they're representing the Black community, but they're not a person who's Black. What are you doing to ensure that?
We know that we need to ensure that the person that we hire to assist us in developing the anti-Black racism strategy has to be from that community and have lived experience. We also have the same expectation of the individual that we'll be hiring to address diversity and inclusion in general.
David Mitchell.
I guess, and this is just generally, we need to begin to think about how we situate the conversation that drove the question, because I don't think the question's been answered. And that question had to do with whether or not we are, as a region, prepared to audit organizations that we fund to deliver services, not from the philanthropic in terms of, so that where we have tax dollars funding secondary organizations to deliver services in the region, whether it's home care, whether it's whatever it is that is out that we don't directly provide as the region, that we're providing funds to provide some type of social service. And the whole concept of what does that organization look like that is taking public dollars to deliver that service to ensure that we are not facilitating anti-black racism by proxy. So we pay X to pick up the garbage, and X doesn't work here, but X has no policies, no representation, or different problems, but yet we're funding it, right? So that's what that conversation is, and we're beginning to talk about that in different spheres, where we give funding, taxpayer dollars, to deliver a service, even if it's disaster relief to the, Red Cross, for instance, right? What does the Red Cross look like, right? What are their policies so that we're not by proxy, we're allowing it to happen and we're facilitating with public funds? And that conversation needs to get centered, because I believe that's where that question came from on the line.
Thank you very much to our panel.
You don't have to answer it. I think this is part of the
Conversation piece, because every question is going to end up going to the chair. But I think as part of the conversation, maybe that we need to begin to sort of narrow those things in. So we appreciate the answers, but based on our experience, our lived experience as Black people, as residents of the region, right? So if I get services from whoever that's being funded, but there's no Black people on the board, there's no Black people in management or whatever, but their source of funding is public dollars, we need to be able to leverage our influence in order to ensure that the barriers are removed and that we're not perpetuating by proxy systemic racism.
And I absolutely understand
the clarification that you've given now, and there is a step when organizations come in to apply for funding, they turn in their financial statements. The due diligence that we put forward needs to be different than what it has been in the past, and I absolutely agree with you. So I absolutely heard what you've just said, and you asked for a financial statement, then maybe we should be asking for some other stuff as well. And I think that's a conversation that we will have very shortly to address that issue. And there again, I do want to recognize that there was a time during the region where there was a no grants policy. Now there is a grants policy, so we're doing some really good things, but we can do better, and we can do a much better job.
And we need to begin to look at what they're doing in other jurisdictions. So for instance, in New York City, the city has a rule in terms of minority business. What percentage of that business where we're purchasing goods and services must go to the Black community, must go to the Latino community. It's not just a matter of looking at that, because it's the economic imperative in terms of being able to provide opportunities with the collective dollars of the community, right? And so that's what we're looking at. So I think that's more of where people want to see is what does that mean in terms of fairness and equity and that community that's been disenfranchised not having access.
And speaking of the community, we're going to try to take a call from the community. Joelle has been on the line and is waiting with a question. Joelle, please, what's on your mind? Share your question or your thoughts with us this evening.
Hi, yes, I'm calling to offer a suggestion, a comment. Start by saying that my impression is that the primary focus of Black Lives Matter has been police reform. And I just wanted to say that we can have nice policies and we can that deal with cultural change within the institution, but none of that's going to work. It's going to be just nice policies on paper until you change mechanisms within the police service for processes for complaints and feedback from the public that go directly to the Chief of Police and the Police Services Board. Right now, there is no such thing. I'm speaking from experience, a very bad experience 2 years ago, in which I won't go into the details, but I pursued it up the line in the police services up to, OSHO headquarters and the staff sergeant, and got nowhere, basically just kind of contempt. And it was a very serious issue. And I was told to go to the Independent Police Review Director of Ontario. So I compiled a very detailed submission with complaints about specific officers and specific procedures, sent it in. They responded immediately and said, well, I wasn't the victim, so they couldn't deal with my complaint. But the victim actually was so intimidated in the situation that she wouldn't stick her neck out, so I was acting on her behalf and other people, including myself. So that was it, full stop. It's been almost 2 years and it went nowhere. So I'm so glad we're having this discussion, but I want to say we've got to change the internal mechanisms of the police service so that there's a simple, well-known, accessible process for complaints and feedback directly to the Chief of Police and the Police Services Board. And it needs to be not just from the public, but there's got to be one internally so that conscientious officers can also participate in improving it without worrying about being isolated by their colleagues. I have a little story. A friend of mine, 15 years ago, became a prison guard at Kingston Penitentiary. At one point, he observed a serious infraction by another guard that could have been dangerous consequences. He reported it to the appropriate authorities. In response, his fellow guards ostracized him and made work life so difficult he had to quit. So I think that political leaders need the courage to tackle the intransigence of police unions that stand in the way of accountability of their members, and to provide conscientious officers with mechanisms to help them do their part to improve the quality of their institution from within. So I'd be happy to, participate further and share those detailed issues that I had brought forward. But anyway, I think that, the issue we're talking about now is racism, but
Okay, I think we might have lost you. But that's an excellent question. I'm wondering if Chief Paul Martin might want to speak to. Is there any changes that are coming or anything being looked at with regard to the complaint process? I think part of what she was talking about was within the police force itself, for other police officers to speak up and have that process or that channel.
Well, specifically with public complaints, the issue has been is that the voice has been louder to say that the responsibility for investigating ourselves be taken away and that it be provided to independent review agencies. So in the case of criminal offenses, it's the Special Investigations Unit or the SIU. In the case of public complaints, it's the OIPRD or the Office of the Independent Review Director. So they have to receive the complaints in those cases. I have very limited ability to do otherwise under the current legislation. Now, as you may be aware, the Police Services Act is changing and is in the process of changing through the COPS Act, as it's been referred to. It's been delayed because of COVID, but things are starting to move again. So we'll see what comes out of it. I would suggest to you that it's going to be more independent review as opposed to less. It doesn't stop this particular lady or any complainant, quite frankly, writing to the Police Services Board or to myself or trying to get in touch with me and see what we can do. But we do have to notify, or the OIPRD in this case would have to be involved in a public complaint, and they would deal with it. Third-party complaints, as I understand it, are acceptable. Why they chose to screen it out is up to them, and certainly I have no authority over the SIU or the OIPRD can answer for that. So, but by all means, it doesn't preclude anyone from getting in touch with me or getting in touch with the Police Services Board, but those other agencies, depending on whether it meets their mandate, would have to be included as well. Internally, I'd like to address that quickly. We as a service have tried to do a number of different things to remove barriers and allow people to come forward with their complaints, and the one that was described by the caller is not uncommon, unfortunately, throughout policing or our other agencies, quite frankly. So the one thing that we are trying to do that is different from any other police agency that I'm aware of right now is that as of September 8th, we will be launching an independent ombuds office that people will now have another venue to anonymously go forward and make complaints if there's issues within the work environment. So it's something new. It's new to policing. It's certainly new to the Durham Regional Police Service, and we're going to attempt to create that so that people within our service have an opportunity to have their voice heard.
Thank you very much for that, Chief. A reminder to our listeners this evening, if you have a story you'd like to share, a question you'd like to ask of our panelists this evening, any ideas you'd like to share on the topic of anti-Black racism in Durham Region, we ask you to press *3 on your phone keypad, and you'll be routed to an operator who will take some information from you, and then you'll have an opportunity to speak live to us. Residents who are participating online, listening to the live audio stream, can type questions and comments into the question field on your screen, and we'll have a chance to read those aloud as well this evening. We will try to get to those. We're going to go back live to the phone. Katie has been waiting, and Katie has a question about police handling of wellness. Katie, go ahead with your question, please.
Good evening, everyone. I have two questions, actually. My first one is for Chief Martin. As we all know, in May of last year, an interaction between the Durham Regional Police and a young 16-year-old boy went viral because of the actions of your officers and how they handled a wellness check. Clearly, no wellness check should be handled with such force. Officer Martin, how do you plan on changing the policy regarding wellness checks? Is there not a crisis intervention team to call that is properly trained to deal with people with mental illness?
Well, building on what the regional chair talked about, we do have mental health support. In fact, we have, I believe it's, I can check the figures, but it's somewhere in the neighborhood of 179 of our officers, or 178 of our officers, have been trained as mental health response officers. That's not all of our frontline officers, but it is a large contingent of them. And then we have specialists, our mental health response unit. Currently, we have 2 nurses and 2 officers that work. They're not 24/7. This is an issue where mental health has really been downloaded to police without the funding and without consultation. And we've tried and have struggled, not only our service, but a number of services across Ontario have struggled with the whole issue of responding to people in mental health crisis. Can we do better? Absolutely we can. In the case that you're speaking of, that was a mental health check. It led to some violence. Violence never looks good on video, no matter if it's legally justified or not, and that is really the litmus test for officers. And as you're probably aware, this was investigated by the OIPRD, or certainly the investigation was overseen by them. So you're right. I think we can always do better with mental health response, and I think the steps that the region's taking to add more nurses and our discussions with Lakeridge Health, who have supported us with mental health response, I think can only improve the situation better. I do believe, in my humble opinion, that the money should move upstream, and that mental health and people with that lived experience should be treated with respect. It should not be criminalized, and that we deal with it long before it becomes a crisis situation. Unfortunately, we're still dealing with crisis situations, in some cases armed people, and police are still needed. I hope there is a day that will not be the case.
Thanks for that, Chief. Our next question comes live to us from Matt. Matt has a question about employment to support the Black community. Matt, go ahead.
Yeah, hello. Thank you for having me. Hello, Chair Henry. Hello, panelists. My name is Matt Cardwell. I'm the owner of the 2 Royal Oak Pubs in Whitby. We've been employing local residents for the last 10 years, and I know we've always had representation of the Black community on staff, and that's wonderful. But I'm wondering, from an industry that typically employs young adults, when we get young people of the Black community and of all cultures, is there anything, panelists, that we can do to empower young adults that are just kind of starting into their adult lives and starting into this journey? Things we can do as employers to make them feel maybe that they don't experience systemic racism in Durham, and is there anything we can do to just, without without kind of making them feel in a position where we're asking them differently than we would anyone else, can we empower young people so that maybe they don't experience systemic racism? And I'll leave the question at that. Thank you.
Okay. So essentially, David Mitchell, yes.
Thank you, caller. I think what's going to be important is that you create an environment or an atmosphere where people are comfortable. That is created by the questions that you ask all employees to ensure that they are going to subscribe to your very inclusive, harassment-free environment that you want to create. And then you won't need to sort of ask them special things. You know what you're trying to achieve. You make sure that you're screening people in a way that gives you a good sense of whether or not their behavior, the way in which they conduct themselves, is going to be consistent with what you're trying to achieve in terms of a harassment and discrimination-free environment where any employee, but in this case, in terms of the house that's on fire now, black young people can feel comfortable. And it's as simple as asking all of your employees when you're hiring them, and your managers in particular, tell me one systemic issue that you see that affects black people, right? And then what you would do about it. It's not about you as the employer, right? So they have some power in there. You're hiring them, right? And you should be hearing things like model the behaviors that you expect, being an ally, all of these things. So if you're not going to dig deep to see what it is that you're getting, because that is what is going to really dictate the culture of your organization, and whether it's a small business, a large municipality, or a police service, right? So we need to begin to put the onus back on people to say, what have you, when we talk about anti-racism, what are you doing proactively to fight it? So the first thing is to recognize and acknowledge it. So if you ask somebody about that and they can't tell you, is that really the best, and it doesn't matter where they come from, you know what you're trying to create, and they can't tell you about that, is that the best employee or the most competitive or best qualified employee for you to hire, knowing what you're trying to achieve? And then there's the stuff around clear rules and expectations of customers or patrons. I've been here, my daughter plays hockey twice, and I know this is not a regional responsibility, but in the local towns where she's been called the N-word on the ice playing hockey, right? There's nothing when you walk in that says you're not allowed to do X, Y. It talks very generally, but people, when they decide to go overboard, it's there. So what are your clear expectations, and how do you hold people accountable?
Okay, I think Celina wanted to join in.
Yeah, so thank you, Matt. I believe that was Matt. I think, first of all, there has to be a policy. It can't be on the onus of the individual who's coming into your place of work to then decide that this place you want your establishment to have an anti-racist policy. That has to be established right from the beginning. An anti-racist policy, an anti-racism policy allows individuals within your space to hold you to account in the same way that you'll have a harassment policy. You could have a policy around racism, which provides clear, specific reporting guidelines and accountability guidelines and consequences for bad behavior. I think next, there has to be a sense of inclusivity, a place where people belong. If the culture of your organization is toxic and you don't have a sense of that, bringing people in to work in an environment that is toxic will not have them have a sense of belonging, and they will leave. When we look at some of the research around this, McKinsey put out a report in 2019 around the impact of barriers in the workplaces towards the U.S. economy. And barriers in equality or the racial wealth gap cost the U.S. economy will cost the U.S. economy $1 trillion to $1.5 trillion over the next 10 years. That is a representation of 6% of their GDP. When you think about that on a scale of your local workplace, what are the barriers that you have in your existing establishment costing your company? Because at the end of the day, it's that individual that comes in that is 100% themselves in a culture that allows them to thrive and belong, that is going to impact positively your bottom line. So I think there really is an opportunity here to look at how you work within your organization, establish those policies, establish a culture that allows people to feel that they belong, because culture eats strategy for breakfast. So if any strategy that you put forward is not steeped in a culture that is positive, it's you, the business owner, who's going to end up paying for it, because that employee is going to leave and your return on that investment of training or whatever that they put forward is going to be lost. And like the U.S. economy, if you remove those barriers, that economic benefit will return to your organization.
Thank you very much. Thank you for that. Our next live caller is Michelle, and Michelle has a comment and some questions about what kids are learning in schools these days, when they're in school, that is.
Hi. First of all, thank you for holding this town hall. And just outside of the questions, are there meeting minutes being taken with like actions and everything? Because excuse my naivety, but this is the first town hall I've ever been to, so.
So the question is, minutes being taken for today?
The session is being recorded, and a formal report from the session will be generated. Yes.
Discuss.
Michelle, did you have another question that you wanted to ask the panel?
Yeah, sorry, I'm not live right now.
You're live.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, so one idea is looking at the history that our schools, our public schools, are teaching kids. So I know that there's been a push recently for Aboriginal history. So I'm not really involved in the school system, but I'd like to see what our kids are being taught, and if it accurately reflects the Canadian history for racism.
Okay. So she's essentially asking for a little more information as to what the youth are being taught in schools as it pertains to racism within Canada. Celina.
So thank you very much. I think that's a topic that is very relevant, especially when we look at our school systems. You'd have to be living under a rock to not see what's happening in Peel region and the blatant racism that's happening there. I think we need to understand that throughout our formative years, from JK to grade 12, very little is taught about the Black experience in Canada. And I think this may not be for the region to deal with. The province certainly needs to do that. But that needs to be addressed so that the curriculum better reflects the Black experience in Canada. And the Black experience does not start at slavery. That needs to be reiterated. It was long before that, and we need to have a richness of that history that allows our kids, especially Black kids, to understand their identity within the school system from JK to 12. But I think we need to be understanding of where the North American public education system is rooted. And it is heavily influenced by John Dewey, who himself was influenced by a German philosopher named Hegel. And Hegel wrote that education is the art of making man ethical. And that sounds really good, except for the fact that Hegel also wrote that the continent of Africa is an unsustained mass that has contributed nothing to civilization. Our North American public education system is built on this person's ideology. And he knew that this was untrue, but wanted to justify and rationalize a system of chattel slavery. When the poison is so deep in a system, you need to understand why that system at present day is experiencing symptoms which cause our kids to be suspended at rates higher than everybody else, that cause our kids to not be able to move forward in terms of making choice for university. And I know Ontario has de-streamed and no longer suspends kids in third grade. But I think we really need to look at the system and how the system further perpetuates anti-Blackness through not teaching it, through its hiring processes, through its actual practices. So there's a lot of things that have to happen within our education system to create better outcomes for Black children. And I think that people know a lot of these answers. Reports have been done for years and years and years, and they sit on shelves. And when something arises, somebody says to the author who wrote the report 25 years ago, hey, can you help me find the answer again? And I think that is where we need all community members to push for change so that we're not having this conversation 25 years from now.
Anne-Marie.
So I just wanted to comment on what Celina said and what the member was asking when she called in about asking if notes are being kept, about actionable items, about reports that have been done, that have been kept on shelves and so forth. We could do a lot of reports, we could do surveys, but if there's nothing coming out of it, then it makes no sense. So I want to back up what the caller was asking. Please to make sure that the notes that are being kept, that some of the things that we're asking, the promises that you've given me, Chair Henry, about making sure I have some details. Please make sure that there's something coming out of this town hall meeting, and that it's just not a fad. It's not just us having a conversation and nothing happens after this. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the question, and thank you to panelists for your responses and follow-ups. Our next caller is live, and her name is Sandra. And Sandra has a question about the relationship between Durham Police and the region's Black community. Go ahead, Sandra.
Hi. Thanks for taking my call. I just wanted to know if there is any plans or anything that's going to take place in strengthening the relationship with the Black community, and especially the young Black boys and men and the Durham Police.
Yeah, thank you for that question. Well, when we're talking about accountability and action, the one thing that the Durham Regional Police Service has had is it's had diversity, equity, and inclusion plan since 2005. We are currently operating under the 2020-2022 plan, which is on our website and is publicly available. The other thing that the police service does is that we are held accountable because we report to our police services board. So you can actually see our report card of how we're doing, what we're doing, and how fast we're doing it. With respect to in the improvements, the one thing that we talked about, and I think Celina talked about it, is really having people come in and take a look at those systemic barriers, those things within our policies, the fundamental pieces that we may be blind to, and quite frankly, we probably are. So we're starting with that. That's already begun. That was a commitment we made at a roundtable last December. It got slowed up a bit with COVID, but we've reinitialized that. So we're starting there, yes, and our 4-point plan that I outlined at my opening remarks, talking about collecting race-based data, having people involved in our interview process from the community, interviewing and policy review, the bystander and duty to intervene, and then our demographic census within our own organization. Those things are going to happen. They're enshrined with our executive leadership team. They have committed to it. They are behind it. And these are things that we will be doing to, in an attempt to fundamentally improve the relationship that we have with the community. We know that our relationship is fragile, and it doesn't take much to damage any progress that we've made to this point. So we are actively working towards that. And I would certainly encourage you to read that plan, and if you have any further suggestions, I'd be happy to hear them. Please send them to me. But that's our guiding principle and guiding post right now. Thank you.
And Maria, I believe you wanted to have a comment.
May I make a suggestion, Chief Paul Martin? Sir? May I make a suggestion, please? I'm from the small island of Jamaica, and we have had issues there when I was younger with the police and, you know, the young persons in the community. And they had initiatives like police youth clubs that seek to bring that communication between the police and the young persons in the community. It didn't touch everybody, but it seemed to work a little bit. I don't know if that was one of your initiatives, and I think the caller was asking for, you know, specific programs. I know you probably don't want to speak to one or two in particular, but that was a great thing. I don't know if small community things will work here, but that's just a suggestion that you may want to take into consideration.
I appreciate that. As far as I can be quick, as far as some of the initiatives we have in place. So one of the things, thanks to the province, we have our youth and policing program, and it is a very, very diverse group of young folks that run that program. They run it themselves. The youth run it for youth, and we get a lot of insight from them through the youth and policing program, and they get some insight of what policing is all about, what we are about, and we get to know each other on a human level. We have our diversity advisory committee within the service, as well as a youth committee that's being formalized and is going to be more formal going forward. So it's really about taking the advice of the community. I think it's best that we take the lead from the community because the community knows best what they want. I think we've talked about customer service and customers, and quite frankly, we provide a customer service. And who better to listen to than the customers to be able to shape our policies, our programs, and our future going forward. So we are doing that. Those are just a quick snapshot of some of the programs. I'd be happy to discuss them in more detail, or others in more detail, with you at some point in time. I know we just don't have time for that tonight, but thank you.
Thank you for that. A reminder to our listeners this evening, if you have a question you'd like to ask of our panel, a story you'd like to share, a comment or idea you'd like to share, please dial *3 on your phone keypad, and you'll be put into a queue where you'll have the opportunity to speak live with us. Residents who are listening to the audio stream live online, there is a question field on your screen, and you can type your comments, questions, stories in there, and they'll be brought forward to be read live as well. I'm now going to hand it over to Sean, who's going to read a question for our panel.
Okay, so our next question,
an online question. And she writes, on June 5th, 2020, during an Uxbridge Black Lives Matter peaceful stand-in, our families experienced a hateful act involving the Confederate flag. Will Durham Region take action to prohibit visible symbols of hate and racial intolerance?
The question is an excellent question, Tanya. I'm sorry that actually even took place. It is disgraceful that someone would do that, and it's upsetting that in a region where we have come together in so many different ways, that this simple act, that one act, puts us back months, years. It is just wrong, and it is hurtful. To answer that question, I will have a conversation tomorrow with a series of leaders within the organization to see what we can do about that. It's the first time that I've heard this question, and actually I'm a little shocked. In all honesty, I didn't know that had happened till tonight, and it's wrong and terrible, and I'm not sure if we can ban it, but we can find a way to deal with it, and it's upsetting.
David Mitchell.
Once again, I think it's important that we build frameworks that provide us with the trending and intelligence that we can act in a proactive manner around these things. So this is not new. Not quite sure, and my fellow panelists are shaking their heads, and especially people that are working with young people. And when we're seeing that happen in other places in Canada, so we're not even talking about the States anymore, we need to begin to think about in a very proactive way what we plan to do. So we should be all aware of the recent issue of the nooses at the construction sites. What's the plan in Durham if it happens from the perspective of an investigation, from reassuring people and all these other things? And I don't expect an answer. That's the type of thing. So where this Confederate flag business, in terms of it being a symbol of basically backlash, a racist backlash to say that your life doesn't matter because this is what's important. And we know individually and collectively as Black people what that stands for in terms of history and repression. So I think that, you know, and it's not just from a law enforcement and policing perspective, because right now what the caller's asking for within the legislative or the bylaw making power of the region, is there a bylaw that could be made? Is there a policy? Is there, you know, can we deny permits to things where any of those things happen? But it's around thinking, if it's happening there, what's our plan if it makes it here? I've got a friend in Texas, and what he says is you learn nothing new the second time a donkey kicks you. So if we watch the donkey kick other people, why are we waiting for it to kick us?
Celina.
I just want to add to David's remarks is that we need to really set expectations around this. I've had families throughout my tenure as a member of parliament who say people have it in their windows of their house, in, you know, in other, on their vehicles and other areas. And this is in Whitby, so families in Whitby. So we need to set expectations on what you are capable of doing as a region. And I certainly hope that many parts of this conversation, Mr. Chair, goes to your colleagues, either mayors or to regional councilors and to the province and even up to the feds. You're well connected. There are mechanisms to do everything that's being asked for here, but we need to set expectations on what the region can do and what needs to be done by a collective effort.
Anne-Marie?
I'm just reiterating what my other two panelists have said. I've been to that area in Durham region. I've facilitated workshops, and I've had students in my workshop who are residents there refer to me as a brown lady, even though I have one of the simplest names possible. I've gone into businesses, and I've been totally ignored. So I want to just reiterate exactly what the two panelists have said. I don't know how shocking this may be to you, but I've seen it. So, I mean, and I mean, as somebody who has been around in Durham region, let me not say you must have seen it too, but you must have heard something about it. So, please, there needs to be some kind of plan going forward with regards to this.
Thank you very much for that. Our next live caller is Carwin. And Carwin looks like would like to share a story with us about his son's education. Carwin, go ahead, please.
Hi, good evening, everyone. Thank you for allowing me to speak. I'm an immigrant, and I'm the father of 4 Black boys, 15, 12, 6, and 5. Of the 4 sons, 3 have experienced serious issues, racism, here in Durham region. My eldest son is being asked lots of times, could I call you the N-word, all right, by students, fellow students, and he ignores. As a Christian, we are learned to, you know, walk away sometimes from some of these things. And this is overwhelming in his school. The second son as well, in fact, the oldest son as well, was punched to his temple on the ground in another racist move by students. The second son didn't experience that much, and my third son experienced this as a result of the teacher. I will tell you, all 3 of my sons are high flyers or were top students in the country from which we came. Very brilliant students. Even my young 5 is now 7-year-old son. All right, very smart. When he came to Canada, I understand, and we put him in a French emulsion school in Durham here. They tried to make a list of, I think there's a list that they make up of students who have special needs. And because my son had a little slur in his speech, all of my sons were like that. This particular teacher tried to force to say that he had an issue at home. She had someone speak to him and try to make it look as if he was being abused at home and all of that. I had social protection persons came to my home, and they interviewed our kids and all of these things, and they were surprised that you have a great family. They didn't see anything wrong. They were disappointed. All right. But at the school, because I know there is some list, I think of 150 students, schools get money to put students on this list. I think it's 1.5 million they get or something like that. This teacher was intent on putting my son on that list. And because we objected, the teacher spent every single day making my son an enemy. She went as far, my son was one of the most loving students. Quickly, let me try to wrap it up. To say that he touched her places that she shouldn't, when this little 5-year-old kid just raised up his hand and tried to reach out to her. All right, some false accusations. She tried to study every day because she couldn't understand what he was saying. He wanted to ask her for help to explain what she was saying, and she would put him in a corner and have him there sit every day. Basically, it was affecting and hurting my son. We went through so much. The school sent us to psychologists, or I can't remember what, the speech therapists and so on. We had to pay those monies. The results were our son is very smart and they don't see a problem. The teacher just needs to do certain things, etc. As a result of the experience in 3 to 4 months with this teacher at this school, my son is so traumatized that he doesn't want to see school again. And this young man was so brilliant and so smart. In fact, he had his own YouTube channel called it, saying that he wants to become a scientist. And you should listen to my son, to the things he can do. And now we are fighting and struggling as a family to build his self-esteem and to help our son. We have to put him in a new school. We wrote letters to the superintendent, etc. We got no response. We have nowhere to go. In fact, our son was also physically abused by that teacher. We went to the police station. We called someone. They said that the station may not do anything because they all look out for each other. Those are the words they said. We went there and we asked questions because we didn't want to put our son in a position where police are questioning him and doing certain things to further traumatize him and affect him. Eventually, we got some good advice from the station, but nothing really, no action really was taken against this teacher. As a result, my family is moving our son to another school. We moved to another area so that he will get the school. And I believe that the school system is messed up. The school system is allowing racism. Thank you.
So, sir, this is Celina here. I would like to respond. First of all, that this experience that you've had with your 4 boys are terrible. And one of the things I want to say is that you as a parent should not have to validate how smart your son is or your sons are to not have these experiences. It doesn't matter, but I know that we have to do that. I have similar experiences with my son, who has been called the N-word. He's now 12 when he was 11, and had to deal with that, who is a gifted boy, but would not be tested by the school and became irritable and didn't want to go to school. And when we had to privately test him, found out that he's off the charts, gifted young man. I share this story with you because it happens far too often in our education system, where as parents, we have to constantly be advocating for our children because they are streamed, they are mistreated, and I believe every single word that you're saying about how they are being treated, because I've had similar experiences with my children and how teachers have treated them and how students have treated them as well. I think that there is the Durham Black Educators Network is a group of highly experienced individuals throughout the school system that I think is a shoulder that you could tap on. I'm sure that your experience with your sons is not a unique experience, and having that network or tapping into that network could really help navigate that system of unknown when it comes to what you need to do. But I think more importantly, as we're seeing what's happening in Peel, I think some of these same practices need to be replicated here in Durham region, where it's not parents that have to be, sort of stick handling our children or moving them to different schools. The system needs to be held accountable. And we need to have a blueprint of what is going right in Peel region, have that same thing happen here, but we need to call on our MPPs to do that, to make sure that that happens, so that no child has that experience in a school system within Canada. And I think that that's particularly important. We also have to make sure that we're looking at, or that in holding people to account, we're looking at the research. The research, again, as I said earlier, is there about the disproportional and impact on Black children, the disparity within what happens to Black children, and that needs to be consistently brought forward. So I would advise to connect with the Durham Black Educators Network and to continue to call for action like has happened in Peel, and probably connect with some of those individuals that have seen that change happen in Peel and Vaughan as well.
Thank you very much. Thank you for sharing your stories. Thank you so much to our panelists for sharing your stories and comments and responses as well. Just a reminder to our listeners this evening, if you'd like to participate in the conversation, if you have a story or a question or an idea you'd like to share with the people on our panel this evening, you can dial *3 on your phone keypad, and you'll be put into a queue, and an operator will take some information from you, and then we'll try to get to you live online. People who are listening to the live stream through the Durham website, you can submit comments in the comment field, comments, questions, ideas, and we'll look for an opportunity to bring those forward in our discussion this evening. We've had over 7,000 people participate with us this evening so far through the various channels open to this discussion, so that's really exceptional. And we still have lots of time here together to address questions and stories and ideas. So please stay with us and share with us. Speaking of sharing, the next up is Ella. Ella has a story that she would like to share live with us about policing. Ella, go ahead, please.
Okay, thank you very much for taking my call. I have a question. Due to the recent events, Black Lives Matter movement, was the Durham Police Department defunded? How much and what services did the money come from? From what police services was the money allocated for that defunding?
So I'm trying to understand the question. She's asking, it has to do with the allocation of money or the reallocation of money from Durham Police as it pertains. It was a little hard to hear that one.
I'm sorry. Yeah, I'll repeat the question. Was the Durham Region Police Department defunded? By how much? And where did the money come from? Which police services was the money taken?
Okay, so I think the question is, how much was the Durham Region Police Services defunded, and where did the money come from?
I think it's important to understand the concept of defunding, and one of the complexities of this is that we've been trying to apply a very simplistic label to a complex issue. I think that if you talk to police leaders and people in law enforcement, they understand that there may be things that we're doing in mental health and other areas that should be done elsewhere. So we're talking about detasking and reallocating. So there has been, and that would be in Durham where we live, that would be a regional decision with respect to whether or not there would be any detasking and reallocation. And to the best of my knowledge, and the Chief can speak, there has been no retasking and any reallocation of funds as it relates to frontline policing.
You're absolutely correct. Other than the initiative that Chair Henry spoke about with respect to funding some future nurses to work with police officers and mental health support unit, which we already have in place, but just not a 24/7 operation, that is a real issue of retasking. The issue of defunding, I think probably the best analogy I can provide is it's like a relay race. The other agencies have to be at a run, and we have to be able to hand the baton off on the run, because people aren't going to wait for these services, and in some cases, these crisis services are needed immediately. So I think you're right. I think this discussion has to go on, and I think there's a misunderstanding about defunding. It is about reallocating funds, and I've already indicated throughout this conversation tonight is that I do believe that at some point in time, with proper retasking, that money should be pushed further upstream to deal with a number of these issues, specifically mental health response, much before, or long before it ever becomes a crisis. So I do agree with that, and I think it's definitely a conversation that has to be had.
Thank you very much for that question. Our next live question comes to us from Maureen, and Maureen has a question or is going to share an experience that she had on public transit. Maureen, please go ahead.
Yes, that was about, say, it's after September 11th. It's about 12 years ago. I didn't say anything, right, because sometimes I like to let things go by and pass by, right, because they didn't hit me or nothing like that. But I was on the bus coming from Boomerville. I was in Boomerville, and when the driver was talking, we usually talk good. But this time, when the driver heard us say who I'm living with, the driver gets so mad and angry. He didn't like it. He showed a different face. And then I asked another driver. He told me he started passing on to the drivers, and that lady, don't let her travel on the bus. She's living. What's the matter with him? Is he sick in his brain or something? I asked him if he's sick. I asked him if he's sick in his brain, because I don't know why he should get mad if I tell him I live with the president of Caesar-Chavannes, which is true, because I could prove it. You understand? And then he's angry. He said, that lady said she lived with the president of Caesar-Chavannes. Why should they hire black people to live in? And he said, there's a man and angry. And they all said, they shouldn't hire her. They shouldn't hire her. They shouldn't hire her. I am a fittable person. If I didn't fittable, you understand? They want to take me. I don't think the bus drivers, I don't have no problem with nobody in New York. I was there after September 11th and before. And there's black immigration officer. We didn't have to go to them because we didn't have no problem. Okay? We didn't have no problem with nobody in the States. But we just want to go to talk to them because we're a little early. And when the train they went to leave yet, it used to leave 7 o'clock in the morning. And then eventually, after talking so long and giving some joke with the immigration officer, we held up, we then realized, the officer, we said, no, it's 7 o'clock, you're going to leave. And then the officer said, come. And the officer had to phone the train, and they held up the train. The train never left 7:30 in the morning from Penn Station. There's no way, and they have no problem with nobody. Those bus drivers, I want to know if they don't fit to drive a bus. They custom drive dogs, and they think they're going to keep on driving dogs. I'm not going to tolerate nobody nonsense. None. I just went in and when Mr. Ford clear the border, and I'm going over to see my sister working in the American government. I'm not bragging. I could prove you. I could prove it. Then our nurse teachers all thing over there. I have a decent family. Regardless whether I was a thief or a jail lady, I am not going to tolerate for nobody's nonsense. I'm not good. I just sit in the border open. And I'm going to go over to see my family. Okay? My family don't hate me. Why do you think I'm living in the house living here? It belongs to somebody in America. And they leave me in this house because I'm a clean, fittable person. Okay? I'm not a woman I don't have long tongue. I'm not that. I work very hard. I like the chief of police to tell the drivers, do not interfere in my life.
Let me see if I got that. So my understanding is the lady takes the bus from Bowmanville into the train station, and on a regular basis she has a conversation with the driver, And the conversation turned to representation and asking about why there aren't more black bus drivers. And the driver got upset, and I guess that there was an exchange, and she just felt that she was disrespected, and says that, you know, I'm a resident here, I have a good job, I'm not a nobody, and I shouldn't be treated disrespectfully. And I think this is just, you know, Chair, another piece in terms of public transportation and what we do with people, and we're seeing more and more of this as it relates to civility. So you say good morning to me, I say good morning. I say good morning to the chief, and the chief doesn't answer me, right? What? Not that you would. COVID or no COVID, I'd pull your tie. But then I'm thinking, okay, why did the chief not say good morning to me? Is it the skin I'm in? Simple things that people don't understand, especially in this time where, and obviously it's not the driver or any other public servant in a regional public servant to understand everything that this woman's gone through, but it's just that one more thing when they tell you about microaggressions, right? The last thing that you explained it from, and I tell some of our folks, if you're in a bad mood and you're going to upset people today, call in sick. Don't come to work. Don't upset me, and don't upset the public, and don't upset everybody else that we're responsible for. So it's just, once again, driving that piece around civility, so you minimize the misinterpretation that somebody that's uncivil rather, has bad customer service is all of a sudden equated with being racist, because the person knows nothing different, and everything else seemed to be going fine until we had the conversation about black people. I think that's what she said.
And this is Celina, if you interpreted that correctly, David, I want to distill that down further and bring it back to one of the first points that David brought up earlier. If the central focus of this conversation is anti-black racism with the goal to address and eliminate anti-black racism through programs and policy towards the goal of creating a more inclusive community, then we need to start in our own house. And we need to understand what is happening within the region of Durham and your 5,000 employees, what is happening here. So if she's saying, where are the black transportation workers, then we could have that question as well for every organization, as well as David said earlier, the proxy organizations that the original caller was talking about in terms of who Durham Region funds to do its services. Are they also representative? So I think the caller brings up a really good point, and it brings us full circle. If we're not starting in our own house and recognizing who is working here, and if there is actually a representative sample of individuals who looks like the community within this building, this is the big elephant in this massive room. Who works here? What do they look like? And what levels of management are they at? Not just a percentage of, but what does that look like when you stratify it across upper management, middle management, and worker at the door? Who is here, and are we represented? Are we represented in communities, in organizations that you fund? And that is critically important when you're thinking about putting out a mandate for anti-black racism. If you don't have people at the table who understand fundamentally what that means through experience as well as expertise, then you are going to be here in 25 years, or probably not you, I don't know, but somebody's going to be here having this conversation about anti-black racism because you didn't do it right in the first place. And it can't be just one person that you hire tomorrow and say, well, we got the one person, and that person is supposed to be it. It has to be throughout the organization. It has to be intentional. It has to be sustained. And it has to be such that that person, like Anne-Marie said, that person is able to thrive in this job and do it well.
And just to add, if we are, with conversation, we become more culturally aware. I mean, be aware that as a woman, and a woman from the Caribbean, when I speak loudly, it doesn't mean that I'm angry. It just means that I'm just like this. I'm very vocal. Don't get afraid when I raise my voice. Don't think that I'm stupid when I stutter. It just means that I'm trying to let you understand more clearly what I'm saying, because I'm aware that I have an accent and I'm aware of the audience that I'm speaking to. So the more that your employees, the more that other races are aware of the cultural differences, the more that they're aware of the biases that they hold, the stereotypes, is the better it will be. Because I believe that because there is misunderstanding, misunderstanding breeds hate, and hate is the basis of racism. I firmly believe that. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you for the stories and the comments. Our next caller, who's going to go live, is Mary, and some people may remember that Mary was the very first person who we wanted to bring live on the call this evening, and we had a couple technical issues, but she's still with us. Thank you so much, Mary. We'd love to hear your story, if you can share that with us now.
Thank you so much for accepting my call again. I really appreciate that. I'm going to make it very short. I'm from Africa, a single mom of 2 kids. Bright, beautiful kids. And I'm a frontline worker, which I'm really proud. I've worked as a frontline over 21 years. But my major concern is since I moved to Durham region, I've had a lot of issues about critical accent. When I speak, it's like, oh, you have African accent, we don't understand you. And I'm like, why is it just on this side? No matter how you communicate, to the point I tend to like swallow my voice. But it got to the point that I had to like speak up. And it became that I'm being, rude, which is not the way it is. But when you're trying to like explain something and nobody seems to like regard what you're saying, ridiculing a group, causing very low self-esteem, which were not brought up that way. I wasn't brought up that way. So this time around, I had to like raise my voice. And no matter how much I complain of how this is affecting me, the managers I complain to brush it aside and never address it because they look at it, it's a racial issue which needs to be addressed. As much as I'm making my comments to this group, I strongly believe that people understood what I'm talking about. They understand what I'm saying. I don't have to repeat myself, but it's an ongoing concern that people will laugh at you at work, even after you put all your effort and strength to communicate, which my position, I have to like give report and communicate with them. But because of the way they want to just ridicule you or just like make fun of it and not even appreciate it, and at the same time, you brought that to a manager, it's been brushed aside because, oh, you know what, you need to speak clearer because maybe they don't understand you. No, it's not because they don't understand me, it's because they don't want to understand me. That's how I feel. But it won't stop me from being who I am. But at the same time, it's just that when you complain, as a matter of fact, as of today, what I complained was brushed aside, but I've been reported and suspended actually with no pay for 3 days because I ignored a staff that said, you know what, I wasn't being fair at work. I wasn't being professional. I was just trying to like ignore the fact that I don't want to get upset, but it's been taken as a different meaning. So this, and you can tell the other fellow person is a white person that has a voice. I don't have a voice.
Okay, I think we lost Mary, but Mary, thank you. And by the way, I think you have a beautiful voice, I might add. You spoke very, I understood everything perfectly clear. I think Celina had a comment and then David.
So I really want to thank you for your testimony. And this was actually brought up earlier by Anne-Marie. So we've had someone speak to it. I just want to, I want to acknowledge what you're saying and say that I completely understand. But there is also a negative impact, and I think this is what I want the regional chair to understand. There is an impact when we look at Toronto's children's aid services, and I'll go back to where I talk about hiring people who understand the experience and the expertise of being Black. When we look at Toronto's children's aid services, we see that Black children in children's aid represents 40% of children in children's aid down the street. 40% of those children are my children. And there is no way that that should be a number of children in a system. The issue is that there are not enough individuals who have that cultural sensitivity to understand that when Anne-Marie raises her voice, she's not violent, mad, she's not upset, she's passionate, she might be a little energetic, but that doesn't make her a bad worker, that doesn't make the caller someone that should be dismissed, that doesn't make a parent someone that should get their kids removed from them. This is the impact of anti-Black racism in our systems. In our system, it destroys people. So this caller now will likely, feel so frustrated with her job that she leaves, which speaks to the economic impact of someone as brilliant as her leaving an organization, which speaks to why, again, you need to have individuals who understand that. The willful ignorance of people to say they just don't understand what she's saying is nonsense in 2020. It's absolute nonsense because there is a negative consequential impact, not just for our communities, but for the economy of Durham region as well.
So let me give you two examples, and I think this is important as it relates to the accountability pieces when folks are discriminated against or they experience a microaggression in relation to their accent, which is then generally, once again, connected to their race. So in this case, she speaks, somebody says they don't answer. She complains to a manager. A manager writes down the complaint, says, okay, I'll investigate it. Goes back to the person and says, hey, this person complained that you didn't treat them well. They said, well, I couldn't understand her. And they'll go back and they'll write the complaint off and say, no, okay, that's fair enough. That's reasonable. Would we not say you couldn't understand her, so that's it? Well, as the manager, how did you understand her to take her complaint? But yet you were willing then to say that the employee or the service provider that she was complaining about didn't understand, right? And then we allow people to escape accountability. When I first started working frontline in corrections, we had, I'm not going to name the ethnicity or social identity, we had particular officers that spoke with a heavy accent. And people would always complain, I can't understand them on the radio. But yet, when individual prisoners from that ethnic group came in, their English was good enough for you to translate. We can't have it both ways. We have to hold people accountable, and we need to be professional. And professional sometimes means sitting there and listening carefully, because it's intolerance based on, or impatience based on color, right? Some people we will listen to, right? And I know the chief has done some work here because we've had these experiences with the Speak Up Durham, and where people are actually say, okay, I actually got what you said because I spent the time, right? And some of this comes back to the civility piece. So some of it's also holding the managers accountable. You're prepared to write off a complaint as being unsubstantiated because you claim that the individual who's the respondent didn't understand, but you understood exactly what, because you took the complaint down in writing, you didn't ask them to, and that's acceptable. And this is how insidious it gets. So I think that it's important that we drive, it's those little things that just build and build and build, and then we have the explosions.
Anne-Marie?
I completely agree with my two panelists. I'll tell you a lot of reasons why we have Black persons, and especially persons from, parts of the world, Africa, the Caribbean, that don't speak up, that accept certain abuse, is because we're scared. We're scared that we may lose our jobs. And then when we lose those jobs, it's 3 times more harder for us to get another job. So when we're in a certain job, we'll take it. Oh, she's stupid. How did she get that position? What is she saying? Why is she even here? We hear them. We know, we understand. But we don't say anything because we're scared. And there isn't a lot of job security for persons like myself. And I wish that we would do something about this, because then if we were able to speak up, you would understand us much better. You would know where we're coming from. You would know that we're hardworking people, we're hardworking individuals who just want to be heard. That's it. just understand us more. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. Our next live caller is Suzanne, and Suzanne would like to ask a question or share an experience about police services. Suzanne, go ahead, please.
Okay, first of all, I'm in tears because I feel so badly for all these people that are out here in Durham. That man with 4 kids that is having to deal with teachers treating his children that way. And the lady that just spoke, I had no idea it was that bad out here in Durham. And so I am so sorry that exists. I'm retired. And if any committee wants to get set up with anything to do with helping with anything with the Black people, I would certainly be on it. I'm great at paperwork. I would do any of it. And then next, Durham Regional Police Services, 95% of them are wonderful. I thank them for their service, and God bless them for what they have to put up with. However, I had a very horrible experience 18 years ago when my son was 27. And they were called the Durham Regional Police Force at the time. And the good old boys taught the new boys how to take care of the young teenagers, whether they're Black or white. And at that point, they were mostly white. County boys. And they were beaten and thrown in the fields around here. And my son happened to be one of them. We moved out here 30 years ago, and he was about 15 when we moved out, and 27, he really wasn't doing anything wrong that night, and got brutally beaten in a parking lot, the police station, and we sued. And his life has been hell since then. I'm very thankful for Officer Friendly, who, when my son ended up with mental health illness because of it, was awesome and led the police force to help me and his dad get him to the hospital. So there's a whole lot of things out here in Durham we need help with. And I would gladly help on any committee for anything.
Okay.
Thank you so much for that. Thank you so much for that. That was it 17 years ago? Did I get it right? Quite some time ago. 2020 now, but it shows that there are some significant strides that have happened. We still have a ways to go. But some of the trauma that people are inflicted with stays with them for life. And that's something that we need to remember as we take steps towards creating a better future.
Go to our next caller. Thank you very much for that. Sasha is live with us, and Sasha has a story about a professional experience she had with racism. Sasha, go ahead, please.
Hi there. Thank you for taking my call this evening. The panel has been amazing. I just wanted to say that with information, support, and experiences as well. So I wanted to share a professional experience that I had. I work for the region of Durham, and I am a proud member of the workforce in Durham. I live outside of Durham. And when the death of George Floyd and Ahmaud Arbery came about, there was some tensions happening, and my first instinct was to check on my colleagues to make sure that they were supported and to know that if they needed anything, that we were here for them. So I voiced, I asked if we could perhaps distribute a message of solidarity throughout our department, just to show that we are here for whatever support is required. And I was told that due to Durham Region having a police department within our regional strategy, that would be discouraged. And I was really disheartened. I'm 40 years old, and I have 2 children who are mixed. They have had experiences, racist experiences within the school system, and my children are quite young. And so all of this just kind of flooded me with, okay, professionally, where do I go with this? Is this something that I push for? Is this something that I step back and say, is this my place? But I was disheartened, and I kind of took another route, and I went through our professional organization, and we started doing some work from there. I guess what I wanted to share was, I was disappointed because regardless if we have a police service within our region, this isn't only about police brutality. This is systemic. This is institutional. It goes into our school system, as we know, as we've seen. And beyond that, professionally, I wanted to know that I didn't have to feel, as most of my Black colleagues, I'm sure, have felt many times over the years, dismissed, thought of as, this is not important, because it is very important. And I was quite disappointed for those reasons. So I wanted to share that experience. I don't know that much has happened since then. I do see people kind of hopping on board now, and with all the attention that, Black Lives Matter movement has been getting, which they surely deserve and deserved a long time ago, I just feel like it was a really slow response. And I still feel like, I'm sure if you asked our staff how they feel, our Black staff, they would probably tell you, all of their experiences and share that they don't feel supported. And I wanted to make sure that we talk about this, that this isn't something that should be kind of swept under the rug or people are afraid to talk about. If that means that we need to integrate some learning into our professional days, our professional lives, that's what we need to do. And I just wanted to show support and solidarity for all of our Black colleagues within the region of Durham. And I thank you so much for listening this evening.
Thank you. Celina?
So has the region put out a statement?
A statement on anti-racism and solidarity with the Black community. So we know the chief has, right, and spoke to his officers about that. Was a statement issued to your employees of Durham?
Oh, absolutely. Sorry, Mr. Chair, I'll turn it over to you.
Actually, I made a statement during not our last council meeting, the council meeting before that, and during council about exactly what we were doing and how this was coming together tonight. So there has been a statement made, and through the CAO.
So, sorry, yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, I also did a statement, and it was a topic of conversation in one of the town halls that we had with all staff. We've been doing them regularly throughout the COVID crisis.
So, I appreciate the caller coming forward and actually feel sort of blindsided here that we're at a town hall on anti-Black racism and the region hasn't publicly put out a statement. Is that what I'm hearing?
No,
Is there something on your website? Is there something on your website that says solidarity to the community related to anti-Blackness?
I'm looking at the chair, and it's just because it's not top of mind, because we did our statements early on. As soon as the issue became prevalent, we did a statement to staff, and I think we also said something publicly, Mr. Chair, if I remember correctly.
There again, during our council meeting, I made a statement during council meeting to bring the issue to council, what was going on. So I'm a little bit off guard just because of the timing, but we've done a number of things.
In fairness, I think Celina is asking based on what the caller and the employee is saying. They didn't. Basically, what we heard was she wanted to do something to demonstrate solidarity at this time and going forward. And whoever, not necessarily you, within that immediate circle of authority, said no, because we have a police department, we don't want to offend them, because one of the drivers has been obviously the policing situation. So we're just trying to get our heads wrapped around. That's why we were just sort of Googling over here. So I know the chief did. And so we're trying, and we know in other municipalities people have done things, or the CAO has made a statement to the all of the employees. So we're just trying to sort of balance that up with where we are.
I think, Dave, you're being quite generous with time here. It's either they put out a statement or they did not. If you have a community that has Black representation in it or not, there is a global movement around anti-Blackness, and did the region of Durham put out a statement? And I'm not going to expect an answer because clearly you need to look or confer to your notes. The point I want to make is back to my original point in my opening statement, Mr. Chair, and to the person that called, and I hope to the listeners, is that receipts need to be kept from this meeting. And I think it is important when you think about, and I appreciate the town hall, but having things confined that you cannot publicly post on a public space, not within here, and maybe a few people hear it, and maybe a few people may pick it up, but publicly post to the people of Durham who look like me that we do not tolerate anti-Black racism in any form on any day, especially Sundays, then I feel like there might be a slight problem. I feel blindsided here. That needs to be done. It's not good enough to just hold a town hall. It's not good enough to just make a statement within these walls. You need to put it publicly, and then you need to follow up with action. Maybe I'm wrong here, but I really feel blindsided that was
tonight to put the position forward, and I'm
to confirm that. And we certainly did extensive communication with all staff across the region, but there was a public statement.
As the moderator, I'm going to jump in at this point because we have
come to the end of the discussion that we had planned for this evening, but obviously much discussion left to be had. Channels for other residents to participate in the discussion with the region, whether it's through your voice at durham.ca or durhamstrong at durham.ca. That's Durham Strong, all one word, at durham.ca. And I'm going to pass things over to our moderator, Sean, who's going to wrap up for the evening.
Thank you, Jody. Given the times that we are living in, we have two important choices to make. We can either choose to be reactive and respond to issues once they arise, or we can be proactive, preparing to respond to potential issues in advance. The key here, in my opinion, is to do both. We need to react immediately to the plethora of issues affecting the Black community, but also to take preventative measures for the future. The data is there and can no longer be ignored. It is my hope that the region of Durham will take the information tonight that comes to us directly from the people within the Black community and other communities, and continues to take important strides towards laying important foundations that can build a stronger tomorrow. But the change has to start now. As Dr. King said, have faith. We don't need to see the entire staircase, just take the first step. Tonight was definitely a step. It was an important step, but it cannot be the only step. I'm hoping that this discussion can continue. On behalf of everyone here, thank you and good night.
The Access Live event has ended.